Hello there. This is another episode of In Conservation With. I'm not sure what to call them, whether they're episodes or installments or just another In Conservation With. But here we are, and here we're at again talking about lots of different things. Tonight we're going to speak with our guest, or I'm going to speak with our guest to start off with. The guest tonight is a man called Bob Planque. And I hope I pronounced your surname properly because I've been.
There should be an accent on the last E, so that's
Planque.
Planque.
Planque, I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
fine.
Planque. And the thing is, we didn't have time to talk before we started. Actually, that's why. That's why I didn't get those formalities over with. But just want to say thank you to Leica Sport Optics for supporting us, as well as CJ Wildlife, who are a team of passionate nature lovers and experts in garden wildlife on a mission to make nature accessible for everyone, whether you are a nature novice or a garden guru. They want to inspire, educate, and provide the right tools to help wildlife thrive right on your doorstep. So that's what they are about. So thank you very much. Tonight is an interesting subject, as I said. They all are, but this is, something that I've really found interesting because I've never really Xenocanto, and I hope I pronounced that right, is something is a service, is a thing that I've never really. I mean, it's always been there as far as I'm concerned. People talk about Xenocanto and that's it. You just refer to it, but we'll learn more tonight. But before we do that, Bob, how are you? And where are you? And I know how you are, but tell us anyway.
I've been better. So I'm one of the zillion COVID victims. So I'm pressing along tonight, doing my bit. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Luckily, I didn't completely crash, and so I could still do this tonight. I'm very happy to be able to do it and not have to postpone it.
Yeah,
And happy to be here, David. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you very much for accepting. And having COVID and doing this is not easy. Having had it myself and had to give a presentation at the biggest week in America, but online, not face to face. It was draining. It killed me. And on this particular In Conservation With series, well, not actually this series, but in the previous series, we did have someone with full-on COVID. Per Ulstrom.
Oh yeah.
He had COVID, but he battled through. But at the end, you can tell that he was flailing. So yeah, that's terrible.
Just that one paracetamol keeps keeping me going, so the strain is not too much.
Good. So did you say where you were? I didn't quite catch.
I'm in The Hague actually. So I am from Leiden in the Netherlands originally, and I live in The Hague, and I work in Amsterdam at one of the two universities. I'm a math biologist, was it called? So I'm a mathematician by training, and I mostly work on problems to do with that have a biological slant, whether they're actually usually not birdsong, but more like microbiology or some ecological things. Or I worked on social insects for a while, things like that, and try to make maths out of that.
So mathematical biology, I suppose, is the full term. What in a nutshell, what is that? Because I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I can easily fill the hour with that. So essentially, what we try to do, these are big bookkeeping models. So in a way, one of the better illustrations of what we kind of do is what you've seen in all this COVID modeling. So where people try to make predictions about who interacts with whom, and if you make these kinds of assumptions about transmission and longevity of how long people are ill and infections and so on, you get a wave of infections that spreads across the country, and you try to control it somehow, right? So these are also big bookkeeping schemes. So in my case, it's mostly about metabolism, where chemicals are interconverted by proteins, and these reactions, they weave big networks of reactions called metabolic networks. And especially bacteria are absolute masters at making funny decisions about which parts of their networks to express or suppress, and by doing that, staying alive in in a ever-changing world. And they're masters at doing that, and we just try to figure out basically what makes them tick.
Okay, but as a child, you obviously didn't think that way. You probably had a very simplistic view on life. What?
I've always wanted to be a biologist, actually. I just never became one, but I'm on the right side of the table, where I get the data, and I
So
don't have to do the pesky experiment. I guess they also think that they're on their right side of the table because they wouldn't want to do my maths. But so I was trained as a mathematician, but I wanted to be a biologist, something to do with birds, or even before that, maybe a herpetologist, but that never became very serious. And both my parents are biologists, at least they used to be, and before they just started doing other things. So this came natural. And then when I was around 16, 17, I had a classmate who was extremely gifted at math. I mean, I'm decent, but I'm definitely not a genius. But he was really very good. And he kind of opened my eyes with all the things you don't do in high school that are much more fun. That if you study maths, that you actually go and do those kinds of things rather than the sort of drawing graphs and solving some equations that you do in high school, which I was good at, but I didn't find particularly interesting.
yeah,
And
nor did
so
I. Nor did I. So that's where I fell over. That's my first.
exactly. Well, everyone needs a positive nudge once in a while, right?
But it's really fascinating when you think. I mean, years later. I mean, I wish they taught me this at school, but years later, you suddenly realize that everything in life has to do with maths. You know, you're driving, you're working out, you're calculating distances. You know, you're thinking about lots of things. Everything you do in life actually has got maths attached to it, hasn't it? Really.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. Which keeps us busy, definitely.
But
So
um,
just don't ask me anything about stats because I don't do stats. But all the rest should be okay.
okay. I mean, I noticed from your backdrop, your background, you got that tufted puffin, and you got bird book there, birds, Collins Guide, and you got some beetles. So when
The
did you
beetles are done
interest?
by my son, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he likes to collect beetles. We mostly collect just the dead ones. And there's actually someone in the waiting room, by the way. And I can probably admit this person too.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, we like to go out and collect. Usually we just try to find dead things, and only once that we try to collect some other things and kill them for sport, so to speak. Two individuals per species, but generally we just try to only take the things that are dead, and then we take them home, and he tries to pin them, and he's getting better at it. So
Good.
that's nice. Yeah.
But did you have an interest in natural history as a kid?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so I was always out counting birds here in the dunes when I'm from like 15, 16 or so. And well, that's actually one of the first times when I got started into bird song because most of the locals did everything on sound. When you count birds for transects or for breeding surveys, especially in a place like the dunes where you have all these thickets, you basically don't see anything. And so, but you still have to write down every single bird that you see, being it, I don't know, whether it's a song thrush or a nightingale or whatever it is, it has to be written down. And so if you don't know those songs, you're not getting, you're not getting very far. And they are very apt with all the migration going on and spotting all these things that were flying overhead just on sound. I never got that good at it, at least not here, certainly. But I did that from like 15, 16 years old. I did these counts and started really listening more carefully at birds. Yeah.
So what was it about bird song and bird calls that fascinated you? Because obviously,
Yeah. Well, one thing that I find always fascinating is that sounds comes to you. And so you don't have to go looking for it. So it's actually so in a way it's really lazy. So if you want to record, get any kind of recording, the only thing you need to do is just to put a microphone and the sound will just come towards you. You don't have to search for it. Of course, you have to know what it is or try to find out what it is, which is not so easy. But I find it a very accessible way of experiencing and figuring out what's where. Whereas if you want to, especially if you're, let's say, in some big forest and you would try to actually find something by sight, I mean, that's definitely a menace. Most things sit still for a long period of time. And so just for finding things, sound is usually a much easier way to get started, at least. And of course, then you have to know, or you know where to look. And so you go and search for it and you try to get a spot to try to see something. But actually over time, I started watching less and less. So I mean, I've got a nice pair of binoculars and everything, and also a scope. So I do really enjoy watching birds. But after a while, certainly if I'm at my local spot, I mostly just listen. And I don't really know why that is. It's like, well, I can sort of tick the box the moment I've listened to it and I know what it is. I've I've kind of put it. It's got a home in my brain. And of course, it may be something that is sort of exciting, and so you go out and watch it anyway, of course. And there are lots of birds that don't make any sounds, or hardly any. So seabirds, for instance, you don't do by ear, and most people don't anyway. So of course, then you have to sit and watch for long hours and just do bird watching. But I find it mostly just a very an easy way of just listening and experiencing the world around you. You can do it. You're the urban bird, all right. So that's one of the things I always do when I'm in the city. I just subconsciously I just keep on listening to the things around me, and I pick up birds that are flying overhead, whether they're gray wagtails, for instance, now, or migrating redwings, for instance, that you would hear at night, and you just see the activity by just listening. So that's just I just find that fascinating.
It's interesting because I've been birding all my life, and it's taken me until recently to realize that there are maybe 3 different types of birder in terms of how they watch or witness or observe or whatever birds, record birds. There's the ones that listen. You know, I've been with people, especially in the States and in the neotropics, and they're shouting out all these birds, and you're kind of thinking, I can't hear anything. You know, I can hear everything. And then you have people who are visual, who you can see things moving, and you know, that people would never see. You've got the ones that are super talented that have both skills. I put myself in a more visual camp because I find it difficult, you know. So you must be pretty hot when it comes to, you know, birds coming around in your local area. But for me, I find it, because there's so many. I mean, I get questions all the time about, oh, how do I recognize this bird song? What's the best way of learning bird songs and stuff like that? And I always say to them, well, if you listen to a recording on an app, listening to one bird on one day, which could have been, you know, whatever the circumstances, which may not sound like the same bird you're watching today, even though it's the same species. So firstly, you know, do you think there is that sort of difference between birders? Do you think that some birders are more heavily on the ear and others visual?
There's definitely a group of people just simply find it very difficult to memorize sound. And I really don't know why that is. I also don't know why some other people find it so easy to memorize them. But there's definitely a group of people just so my father, for instance, who really likes going out, and he's more of a plant person originally, but he simply cannot remember, even after multiple repetitions. When you ask him later, like, what was this then now? he just doesn't have a gift for that, and he has many other gifts. So I just happen to be able to memorize them relatively easily, although I don't have a particularly good memory in general, and I definitely am not an expert, not in bird sounds nor in vision. I've kind of outsourced that with my website. So I don't get all that out much either these days with the kids and so on. I used to go out much more. But no, I do think that people are rather different, and some people have extremely good ears, much better than mine, and they just pick up things, and they have a very, very good memory for things that they've heard in the past as well, that they can remember something and they say, well, this must be whatever, because I've listened to this 10 years ago, and I remember that song type, and I'm like, what? So there are these people that have a real gift for it. But I would, if you would ask me how to teach yourself bird songs, I don't really have a good recipe either. I know I put some time in it. So I wrote. So I see from Amanda that she had to learn this visually. I also learned them visually. So I started writing them down, scribbling them on paper, sort of doing frequency over time diagrams, sweeping up or like trills or things like that, where you just try to make a a short note. And that, in a way, just the handwriting, and that's for maths as well, just the physical process of writing something down is just something that's good for memory. And that's one thing that I've had to do to learn from cassette tapes back in the 90s before going out into the dunes, because I just had to learn these, let's say, 50 to 100 species for my local patch. And there was no, and I made stupid mistakes all the time, like chiff-chaff and chaffinch, for instance, which I thought were really alike, and they really have nothing to do with one another. I found later, but I made these kinds of mix-up all the time.
The thing is, I mean, you know, I can't. I like, for example, crested tit makes a trilling sound. I mean, I've seen tons of crested tits in my life, but when I hear them in Scotland, I know I hear them after hearing them. Oh yeah, I won't forget that. And then a minute later, I've forgotten it. It's taken me years. I mean, I'm talking about years. I mean, I'm now living in Extremadura in Spain. We've got crested tits there, and now at last I can understand and recognize them, only because I hear them continually. Whereas I can see a bird once, and I recognize it again. So maybe it's how our brains work. My brain obviously isn't tied into sound; it's visual, totally visual. You know, you show me something once, or just a bit of it, and I'm onto it, and I kind of know at least what family it is. You play me a call, I'm struggling. You know.
So I mostly have I think when it comes to the things when I try to place the things that I hear, it is very much based on the setting, so context. So I can hear a tip if it's at night. It's a song thrush on migration. But if it's let's say in Spain or in Italy, where my wife is from, so we go there regularly, I'll think of what are these gray flycatchers? What are they called? The ones that you always overlook.
The blue-headed wagtail.
No, the flycatchers, not the black and white ones.
The spotted flycatcher.
Spotted flycatcher, yeah. So they have also a very indistinctive sound, and it's very distinctive in the way it is undistinctive. Yeah, but I really need the context, like a fruiting tree in the middle of a that I think, oh, that must be immediately this flycatcher will come to mind rather than the song thrush, because it's not a place for a song thrush to make that sound.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's in the middle of the night in a city, I would immediately think of migration, and so it's very context dependent.
Okay. Before you show us your presentation on Xenocanto, one more question very quickly. Do you think, because I've found this when I've traveled around the world, that's another reason why I get confused. I go to America and I'm hearing things that I hear in Europe. Similar, it's like chipping sparrow has a similar kind of call. I can't remember what bird it was now, but something in Europe. Because I heard it, I was thinking, and then they're saying chipping sparrow. And I go to South America and I hear or something like that, and it sounds like something in Europe. Do you think there's similarities?
No, never. So of course, if you've got these very short chirpy sounds, then of course there are only so many flavors of those. But again, I generally do not have this kind of that the European species come to mind. I'm in South America then, and so the things that will try to come to my mind are, I mean, I hope at least, but usually this happens, are South American species. And I generally do not think about the resemblance of, other than maybe also if you see a thrush in the neotropics, the first thing that you think when you see it walking is, that's a thrush. The way it walks is so extremely like a blackbird does. Yeah, that is really striking, with the tail that pops up when it lands and things, and the way it kind of bobs its head forward. So you have these kinds of reminiscences, but and also the sound is very thrush-like for some of these great thrush in Quito or places like that in the Andes. So yeah, you do have that, but generally I find that certainly the songs are really all different, and I rarely think, not that I know all 10,000 species. I mean, I'm not even 10% of that. I generally do not have these kinds of similarity ideas. No.
Okay, well, it's obvious that you have that place thing. But anyway, let's take a look at what you're going to show us tonight. And of course, Zoomers, remember that if you want to watch this in its glory, then make sure you're on speaker view and not gallery view. So let's hear about Xenocanto.
All right. So what I'd like to do today is give you a little bit of an introduction into this, into the website and the project, how it started, and first I'll introduce the team to you. So we're a group of essentially two people, Willem Pier and I. Willem Pier is a material scientist by training in Groningen in the north of the Netherlands. And Sander Pieters works at Naturalis, at the Natural History Museum. And the three of us run this project. And but there are about 40,000 people that are currently registered members. And many of them are extremely active, actually. They're daily there. And so the team really that runs everything is much, much bigger. But Willem Pier and I started this. And I'll say a little about the history, but before I do that, I'll just give you an introduction to the site. So I'll change my screen now and stop this. And now I'll share my the web browser, which looks like that. And so if you go to xenocanto.org, this is what you see. You're probably not logged in. I'm always logged in, obviously, as I'm the administrator, one of the administrators, and so it looks a little bit different for me. As I'll do that in a minute, also for you to see what the advantages are of being registered, which is of course free. You basically get to this site and it gives you a little bit of a flavor of what this site is all about. So we currently have just recordings, right? It's only sound. There are on roughly 750,000 recordings that span on the order of 12,000 hours of recording time. And there are 10,500 species. And as you already see down here, actually, we don't do only birds. We did until very, very recently, and I mean just a couple of weeks ago, when we started hosting all the Orthoptera of the world. And there are 30,000 species of Orthoptera. These are grasshoppers and crickets. And so we've now expanded. And so the spotlight that you'll see if I reload this is actually puts a banner of a grasshopper, because we want people that visit this site to know that we currently also do grasshoppers. And actually it's in Dutch a little bit, and it's a little bit in English. So I'm going to scroll down and put it in English. And now it looks better in English. So if you're here, most people, I guess, will come here just to listen to some recording. So let me try to do that. And I'll just take let's say a black woodpecker. We've got 1,386 recordings of black woodpecker, apparently. And they can be put on a map. And this takes a little while to load. And now you can see that we've got lots of them from Europe, but we actually have also some from Eastern Siberia and from Japan and from Korea, maybe, China. And you see from the dots, if there's just a gray dot, it means that no subspecies was specified, but many people are really avid birders, and they also note that when they know the subspecies. And for woodpeckers, this is maybe not so interesting, but for many other species, it is interesting to know, especially for all these different islands with owls and other groups, to be able to group them by subspecies. And so this is a Google map, and you have also the an overlay of the distribution, which we have for all the 10,000 or so species of the world. And if you click on one of these things, you find a particular recording, and you can listen to it over here. And this is probably not a very good example. It's a bit soft, but that's just apparently what this is. If you go down, you'll see a list of these same recordings, which looks like this. So it's a very sort of just a table with data, which is rather self-explanatory. And of course, all the red things you can click on. And so you can, for instance, look at a page for every individual recordist, and you can go to a page with everything from this particular location. But here you also, for instance, see, if you see this also, and you hover over it, you get a little drop-down thing which tells you which other species can be heard on this recording. And these look pretty familiar. And sometimes these lists are relatively long, depending on how much time someone wants to put in it. And you also here see this little button, Sono. I'll click on one, and you see this thing. So this is what's called a sonogram or a spectrogram, and it shows the frequency in this recording over time. So in this case, the dominant frequency is on the order of 2 kilohertz, and I don't particularly have a good idea what that is. And you can kind of see how this progresses over time. And you can immediately see, even if you're not so familiar with this, that there's a lot of information in these sonograms. And in a way, it is so, because we are visual people more than we are auditory, it's a good way of just navigating all these recordings. So it would be stupid to be able that you would have to press on these buttons all the time. And so up here you can find a different results format. So it's currently on detailed, and the concise looks like this. So you just have less data. This is for when you're on low bandwidth connections. But the sonogram data is the version that I best. It looks like this. And it just gives you a visual overview of all the recordings, and you immediately see which ones are good and which ones are poor. For instance, here you have pecking. You immediately see that from these. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear that. And it's really very different from the standard call of black woodpecker. Yeah, so these sonograms was, we programmed this ourselves to make this possible. And below it, you see what is called an oscillogram. That's this thing over here, which just shows the amplitude of the sound over time. Birders don't use this, but grasshopper people always use this. And so we introduced this recently for the grasshopper people because they always look at these things more than they do at these sonograms. All right, so this is just one species. So how can you go through all these collections? Well, there's many different ways. So if I take this recording, I can also just pick it up by clicking on this catalog number, and that just shows me this one recording and who made it and when it was made and where, the coordinates, the altitude, when it was uploaded, that these are flight calls, and there apparently also are wing beats to be heard. And this is a field recording. There's nothing in the background or so. The recordist says the animal was not seen and playback was not used. Then some technical details. And you can do things with these recordings. You can download them. You can also look at the complete sonogram. Usually you only see the first 10 seconds as a picture. You can embed these recordings on other pages, and you can also discuss them on the forum. For instance, if you think that it's not a black woodpecker. That's basically it. And here, there's something strange with Google Maps today. And the Google Map didn't load perfectly. But you can see also the recording and how it relates to its normal distribution. All right, that's one way of doing this. If I go back for a second, I can also look at how did I want to do this? Let me think how I want to do this. Oh, yeah, here, up here. So here at the top, for one of these species overviews, you actually also see a little so this is in the class of Piciformes and the family Picidae, which is the woodpeckers, and then the genus. You can click on these things, and this gives you now an overview of all these things in the same genus that we have. And this is a very quick way of going through the taxonomy. And so you can, for instance, see that for this white-bellied woodpecker, I don't know where it's from Java by the looks of it, we have lots of different subspecies present, and also you can see which ones we don't have, and there's also quite a few of those. So this must look like a cool map with lots of different nice colors. And so you quickly see where all these subspecies live and how they can, so you can, of course, look at all these recordings and see how they differ very quickly. And so it makes it easy to kind of navigate all this diversity. And you can also filter just by looking at one of these. For instance, let's say I take the green ones over here, and it puts it right there, gives it a different color. I don't know why. And they're apparently only in Cambodia. Yeah, so this is just an easy way of going through these lists. You can go up through the families and say, I want to maybe go to a different family and browse through there and so on and so forth. Of course, you have to know a little bit of your taxonomy, which is not so easy, but at least it's just one of the things that you can do. One cool thing that you can do that most people don't know is that you can browse by region. So this is a totally different way of approaching the collection. You say, well, I was here, I don't know what I heard, but maybe let's say that you're in, I don't know, you were near Syria. So I now have to press on my Apple, my Command and Shift buttons, and you see that if I do that, this thing becomes slightly grayer. And now I pull a box with my mouse and let go, and it starts to think. And maybe not. Try it again. All right, now it did something. It says querying database, and it found only very few, because not very many people go to Syria and Iraq, which is reasonable, I guess. And you see that there are 59 recordings from 36 species. I can open that, which I do on a different tab here. And now I can see all these recordings. And I can also go back and I can filter them and say, well, maybe there's some partridges in here. So I'll filter on partridge. And then it'll only give me there's only one. It's from Saudi Arabia. I can actually listen it from the map. Yeah, so this is just a completely different way of going through these recordings. That also doesn't, you don't need to write down a location name. And there's really plenty that I can tell about all these possibilities. There really are plenty. So one that is reasonable to show is this advanced option here. I mean, it's self-explanatory, I think, where you can just look at filter on all kinds of different things. And if you want a good list, you go to this tips, and you can use these tags in the search box here on the left. So for instance, I can use this gen and then colon tag for genus. So if I do gen and I do pares, then I'll get all the tits in a gray tit, and well, blue tit now is not pares, it used to be, but it's no longer. And I can, for instance, say, well, I was in the Netherlands, so I do Netherlands. So CNT is for country. And if I want to do the recordist, I do rec, and I say, well, it's actually me. And that gives me very quickly just that apparently there were 8 great tits that I recorded in my life, and so not very many. I'm sure I heard many more. Having done that, oh yeah, so no, that's fine. What else? So there's a forum where people discuss things, and you can also filter that a little bit on region. So these are only discussions about European birds, and maybe you're like to solve unidentified things. Then we have the mystery recordings from Europe, and so you can just listen to these. And so this one is from today. Someone recorded a very faint sound somewhere from the Netherlands, and people discussed this. So this was uploaded today, and also uploaded yesterday and discussed today. Someone said we're a meadow pipit, common chiffchaff, and yellowhammer. So you can upload your sounds, and you can upload mysteries, and many people do that. And that these are the main things of what this site can do. Now, if you register, which just means that you have to fill in your name and choose a password, and I'm giving mine now, then Sinocanta looks relatively the same, except that now, if I go to my account, I can do some settings. So where are my settings? Preferences. So here, for instance, I can say, well, my language is English, and the way that I want to find these results is in sonograms, because I find that much more easy, and I don't have to click on this button every time. I also want to see many of them, so the standard is 30, I think. And you can also say whether people can contact you or not. And so you can customize it a little bit to your own needs and make it a better place. It is available in many, many languages. The one with the star are relatively little, so only the species names are translated and the rest is in English. And in the other ones, most of the site is translated. And this is always a work in progress because it's done by volunteers. And they don't have access to the site. They only have access to the texts that they can translate. And so we update this once in a while. So it's never perfect. People sometimes also write articles. I'm the editor. I can see everything, so you can't see all of this. For instance, so I made a little update about all the changes in the website the other day, so to keep people informed. But other people are doing this as well, and they give small tutorials about how to do things like signal to noise ratio, to rate recordings, and then you can put these pictures in, and you can quote recordings, which are then shown like this. And so it's quite versatile in this way. People can discuss it later on, and so on. So that's basically an overview of the site. Let me stop sharing and go back to my presentation. Okay. So how do we get here? Well, basically, Willem Pier and I both had our tapes, and mine were from Ecuador and his were from Peru. We happened to be both interested in that area. So things like these. This is one of my most precious recordings from an Andean tattoo, a kind of nightjar. And there are very few recordings of this bird species in the world. And I managed to get one. I never saw one, but I managed to record it. And here's one from the swamps in Peru. And we basically both were with our hands in our hair. And in the way that, what I mean by that is that we just didn't know what were on these tapes. We had tons of tapes. It's very easy to make recordings. This was very old school. And we were actually pointing microphones in the dark. Yeah, but most of these songs were unknown. There were some good reference collections. Most of them, like the British Library in London, that is huge. It's also inaccessible, certainly for someone like me who's not in London. I can't go there and don't have access to these tapes. And there were some things that you could find, but they were incomplete. So tapes, some CDs, and they basically contained a few hundred species, and that was it. And most of that, even if you bought more, you had more trouble because there was no real effective strategy to go through all these recordings. And the more you have, the bigger the problem. Some people know everything, but I didn't know them and I didn't know how to reach them. And so in 2005, this was basically the situation. And this guy happened to be Dutch. I also never met him, and I won't because I'm afraid he's not around anymore. I'm not sure you will be looking at my presentation rather than at me, but I'm holding up this publication, which is called The Birds of Bolivia. Sjoerd Meyer was living in Bolivia in the 80s and 90s, and programmed a DVD which contained about 1,100 species, which was enormous at the time, just from Bolivia. And not only that, he made it easily accessible, and he wrote down all the species in the background. So there are many examples. There was a link to, what does it say? The location. There's a map that you could click on. And all the background sounds were identified. So Sjoerd was a real master at this. And that's basically what an Amazonian ant pitta apparently sounds like. So this was really an inspiration for us. And we tried to ask him whether he wanted to donate his recordings to the website that we made. So we basically thought, well, everyone's got the same problem. There are only a few experts out there that have learned it all the hard way, but everyone can learn from everyone else. And so the World Wide Web offered some new possibilities. I knew how to program a little bit, and Peru. We knew the area, South America, relatively well. We were well connected with some people there. So we programmed this thing and just put it out there. And this is where we are at the moment. So these are, every dot is at least one recording. If you zoom in, you get many, many more, but I can't do that. So we started there in 2005. We were not really interested in doing anything else other than the neotropics. But of course, there's only a few hundred species that you have to add of the 4,000 in South America to do North America. So we just added those in. And then we did Africa, and then Asia, and at the end, Europe, but that really was not our main concern, funnily enough.
Bob, can I just stop you for a second? Are you actually are you moving your slides on, because we're still stuck on the Ecuador slide, and plus we didn't hear the Potu or any other calls.
How is that possible?
Did you click the share sound button when you shared? Maybe
I did. But it's good of you to mention that. So if I go back to here now, you see a map.
Yeah, we've got the map. Yeah, now.
Okay, very good. So we went through the countries, and one major headache was that we had to go to one worldwide species list, which is the one by the International Ornithological Council, which is really nice for us. And they update it very regularly and very transparently. We have all the subspecies from them. And in 2014, we had a big makeover. And since 2018, it was hosted by Naturalis, which is the museum in Leiden, one of the biggest natural history museums in the world. So about 200,000 recordings in, we had on the order of 8,500, 9,000 species. And we made this graph, and then we extrapolated that around 1,000 were still missing. If you take this plot and put it further, then it takes you to around 800,000 or so recordings to get something that is roughly complete, at least on the species level. And as I said, we have about 750,000 bird songs now. We are roughly here. Yeah, so things are added sometimes. Several hundred species have never been sound recorded as far as we know. And so they're out. There's still a bit of work to do there. But it is relatively complete on this level. It is very much not complete on every other level, for instance, on repertoires and all subspecies and everything else. This is where we were when we made this graph. So why has it worked? Why have people become so enthusiastic about this project? Well, there are a couple of principles that we adhere to. First of all, as long as it's a wild bird, every recording is welcome. And recordings are shared and can be reused, and I'll say something about that in a minute. And everyone can add recordings and voice their opinions and solve mysteries. So you don't have to be a very knowledgeable person. You can also just say, I don't understand this. Can someone help me here? And we also have no appointed authorities. So no one says what it is. That is to say, everyone says what the identification is. Everyone can question any identification.
Yeah, Bob, sorry, have you moved on again? Because we're stuck on we're stuck on the map with the dots on it.
That is a shame.
It is a shame.
Shall I do it like this? I'll do it like that. So if I just... Yeah, we'll just do it like this. So So you didn't see this plot.
No.
Okay. It wasn't all that interesting. So, so these principles we have, I was at the 5th one here. So everyone can question every identification. And another thing is that we're open. So it's we run on open software, and it's free. So it's actually also out there. You can download the software and make your own local version if you're a bit of a technical person. And it is run by volunteers. So there is practically no money involved, and that also keeps people generally happy. There are no conflicts because there's no mismanagement of money. So regarding this openness in sharing, we use Creative Commons for our licenses. And so that means that people can share a recording under different licenses, and these licenses are always shown together with a recording. And so this, for instance, says that this recording is under Creative Commons. If you want to reuse it, the person who made the recording, Peter Boesman in this case, must be attributed. It can't be used for anything commercial. And in this case, if you want to republish this recording in some form or other, then you have to share it under the same license as this license. And I actually have no idea what this last thing is, but these are the first 4 things are definitely the most important ones. So we get requests all the time for people that want to use recordings that do not follow these licenses, but for instance for commercial things, and then they have to ask the recordist whether they can use it or not, right? It's the recordists that hold the right to do these recordings, but these Creative Commons licenses are generally very liberal, and they allow lots of different uses. So our aim is collecting bird sounds, and I can say these days that we collect wildlife sounds more generally. So not only species, but also in the lower level, so subspecies. We want their complete repertoires and complete geographical variation, and definitely on these 2 counts, we're not done yet. We need many, many more times the current holdings to be able to say something that is close to complete. And we would like to be able to classify bird sounds. So this is an old plan, and it is not so easy to make it happen. And if there's some time, I can say something about the current efforts in this direction. How is all of this used? Well, at the moment, about 3,500 scientific papers have used in this collection in one way or another. So this is just a Google Scholar searching for a xenocanto, and about 300 to 400 papers per year are now being published in one way or another. And people use these recordings for radio shows, for CDs, theater productions, documentaries. There are many different apps that use birds for if you want to listen to something in the field. People make nature walks and put some recordings to that, or exhibits in museums. And there are these automatic recognition challenges, which has to do with this classification. So we supply recordings for algorithms to be trained. So where is all this going? Well, in 2018, things started to be hosted at Naturalis. More definitely, they've been helping us for 10 years before that, but now it's really hosted at the museum. And so they rewrote many parts of the code, and it's moved to a permanent infrastructure. And they maintain the code on our behalf. So we tell them what to do, essentially. Which means we have to ask for money left and right to be able to pay them, not for the maintenance, but if we want to do things that are new. And we've opened up to global portals like GBIF. This is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility that harvests in biodiversity data from around the world, and 90% of all the sounds on there are currently from us. We've also opened up to developers so that people can code. And we've now, in 2022, started hosting grasshoppers. And crickets and many other groups will follow. So this has taken a year's work, and we've really done the work in such a way that adding other groups like bats or other mammals or frogs can now be done very easily. So I think within about a year or so, we will have opened to other groups of basically all the sound producing groups of animals in the world. And there's still plenty of cool stuff to come. So I wanted to thank, to end this overview by thanking basically the people that make it all the cool place that it is. And that's really the people that contribute. So there are thousands of people from all across the globe that contribute recordings and knowledge and time and effort. And there are also lots of different partner organizations that have helped us in the past or are still helping us in the present, that make this project as cool as it is at the moment. So that's what I had prepared.
Very fascinating indeed, Bob. I didn't realize that the website actually had so many functions on it. I've always seen it as something, but you check if you're in the field and something and you want to hear what a Richards pipit sound like, you got about 100 different calls to go through.
Yep.
I mean, I noticed, am I right in saying this, but I feel that in Britain we are less tuned into the bird sound thing than Europeans and Americans and South Americans. I noticed, looking at your presentation, that a lot of the contributors were either sort of northwestern Europeans.
It's true.
Or Americans or South Americans. Why is that? Why, for example, is Britain less sort of, why are the British birders less into that than other people?
You tell me. I actually have no idea. So it is certainly true, even though from my personal perspective, I was not so interested in Europe, basically because it's not one of the places where you can learn the most. Most is already known. So for me, that South America was more interesting, or perhaps Asia. But definitely more than half of everything that comes in at the moment is from Europe. And as you say, most of the people that contribute are Germans and French and Swedish, and quite a few Dutch people as well. And it is a bit strange indeed that with the given the fact that birds in England or in Great Britain in general are so popular, that so few people listen, or at least record. I guess many people listen, but few people, at least that I know of, record bird songs. And I really have no idea why not. Maybe it's the wind. You have too much wind or rain. No, but we have plenty of wind and rain in the Netherlands too, and there's still plenty of people so nocturnal migrations, for instance, is a fad. And people just put a microphone in their backyard in migration time and just keep on recording at night, and then check the tapes in the morning. And so that's really a thing at the moment that gets sometimes overwhelms the input of the collection, because these are usually extremely poor recordings that you have to wade through. But yeah, no, in general, I just really have no idea why this difference is there. It's definitely not that people don't know about bird sounds. There are some very, very good people, obviously.
Yeah, and what I love about this Zeno Canto is the fact that, or Zeno Canto, is the fact that it could be instrumental in finding cryptic species, new species. People. I mean, it could be that, and also to identifying birds that people haven't got a clue about, and then they listen. For example, the classic example was recently in Britain. We had a Paddyfield pipit turn up, and people were wondering what the hell is it. And Paddyfield pipit didn't really come into the equation. They thought it was a blinds pipit, I think. And then someone had the bright idea to listen to Zeno Canto, and suddenly realized there's a match. So it shows that it's really useful. But do you think that Zeno Canto is more for experienced birders? Would you suggest to a beginner learning about birds to use your function as opposed to going to Merlin or using a general app, you know, that has bird pictures in it as well?
So one thing that I can show you that I think would be useful to everyone is the following. So you're a registered member, right? And you can see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a registered member and you like to go birding in a particular place. So suppose you've got some blackbirds. So let me try to find a bird that doesn't have millions of recordings. Spotted fly, for instance, 1200, that's doable. So sometimes for the most common species, there are so many recordings that, that it grinds things to a halt a little bit. So for instance, this, yeah, I can say, well, this is actually this recording here. I find representative, or it seems at least it's a good recording for my local patch. So what I'll do down here, I don't want to revise it. I don't want to delete it, definitely. And you generally, I can do that because I'm the admin. You generally can't. I want to add this to a set. All right, so I'm going to add this to a set. And I'm going to create a new set. And this is, okay, so I've got this new set. And I've added this recording to it. And now I can go to my account and I can go to my recording sets and it has my new set. And here it is. So I can actually make a collection of sounds that is relevant for my local patch. So I don't have to wade through everything. I just have this maybe this on my phone, for instance, as a bookmark. And that allows me to just use this as a set to browse through the things that matter to me. Yeah, so I can do this. I've made here one for Mayendale, which is my local patch, right? I've actually made one for my local patch. And I made one for Parque do Zizo, which is a place in Brazil. And I was going through recordings. So these are just good recordings for my local patch in the dunes. And there's another one that I made for Parque do Zizo, and which is a place in Brazil that I went to once, and I had recordings, and I wanted to go through other tape and to identify sounds. And so I just made this set very quickly by doing this like explore a region, and then you have a certain collection of things which are local to where you want to go, and then you say, well, all of these recordings, put them in a set. And then they've just put, you've put them all together. And that, I think, is a very easy way that not many people know about, that allows you to set it, to make it work for you. And I think that's much more useful than having to go through to a site and then search every time gray tit, blue tit, crested tit, and then wade through recordings and see which one is relevant, right? You can just do this once.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, we're running short of time, and we could talk about this. We're just only scratching the surface, actually. And that's the thing, guys. If you are not a member of the Urban Bird World community, then you won't be able to hear what happens next, which is the Q&A. So become a member, and you'll be able to hear all of that stuff that's just we're going to be talking about in a minute. But in the meantime, I need to ask you, Bob, if you could be anywhere in the world, where would you be right now?
If I had the bottle, I would be in a submarine in the deep sea. That's one place that I have always dreamt about going, because it's one of those off-the-chart places that I can't imagine being there. I can imagine being in the Himalaya or whatever, right? But in the deep sea, I think that would be scary as hell and really cool.
That's the most original we've ever had. So amazing. And what natural sound?
Ah, yes. I'm going to make a sound. I'm going to make you listen to a sound that I had prepared. This is, I've never heard it in real life. It's called a tui. Where is it? There you go. And it sounds like this. It's from New Zealand. Is that crazy or not? There are better recordings now that I listen to it. But some are really just out of this world.
I mean, that sounded a bit like...
So that's one of my really favorite.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like R2D2 a little bit in style.
Yeah, it
but
does. It does.
But I believe that was based on the bobolink in the
Oh,
States.
is it? Okay.
But that to me sounds like a North American oriole, you know, an icterid. I'm sure my North American friends might agree or disagree, but that to me
An
sounds...
Oropendola, yeah.
Yeah, it all sounds. But for me, one of my favorite sounds, actually, I heard it when I was in Costa Rica. Well, I didn't actually hear one singing. The guide was using it as a lure to get birds in, and that was a ferruginous pygmy owl. It has this really funny call, which ends in a tiny little whinny of a horse. It sounds like My Little Pony at the end. It sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a bird. So incredible. Anyway, Zoomers, just to let you know that we've got some more great talks coming up. We've got Ifan Lee on the 8th of November talking about bird conservation in China. We've got on the 10th of November, Barend van Gemmerden even, and he's talking about the conservation of migratory birds. And on, what day is that? The 14th of November, we've got AJ Tegala, who is a presenter and writer, and he's talking about his book. And basically he's talking about the confessions of a countryside ranger, and then there's a ton more people coming, so keep watching the website for more people that we're going to be talking to in conservation with. Remember, if you become a Urban Bird of World community member, you can hear the Q&As, which are great. I mean, we're going to have a great one tonight, I can tell. So Bob, I'd like to thank you very much, despite being sick, coming out of your sick bed to talk to us tonight and really get us excited about bird sounds and your wonderful creation, your co-creation, Xeno Canton.
My pleasure.
And Zoomers, thank you for listening in and being there as well. I'm David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder, and I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all again real soon. And don't forget, keep looking up.
And listening.